Admiral Zyra Xari stood at the viewport of her flagship, the Stellar Dawn, watching the blue-green sphere of Earth grow larger. Her iridescent scales shifted from their usual royal purple to a concerned shade of gray as she contemplated her fate. The Council's decision still echoed in her mind: if the alliance between humans and Centaurians was to survive, their military forces needed to integrate. And she, the youngest admiral in the Centaurian fleet, had been chosen as the first test subject. The ship's crystalline walls pulsed with a soft warning light. Admiral, her second-in-command, Vex, approached with characteristic grace. Earth Command has cleared us for descent. They're expecting you. The pause in his voice carried all the doubt the Centaurian High Command had expressed when this plan was first proposed. Zyra's facial tendrils curled in what humans might interpret as a smile, though it held no mirth. Tell me, Vex, what do you know about human military training? They're primitive, Admiral. They still rely on physical combat and projectile weapons. Their tactics are. He searched for a diplomatic word. Basic. And yet, Zyra turned to face him, her scales shifting to a deep blue of authority. They've managed to hold their own against the Krell Dominion, the Nexus Collective, and even gave our own forces pause during the border skirmishes. She moved to her command console, calling up footage from various human military encounters. There's something we're missing about them. Something crucial. The descent to Earth's surface was smooth, though Zyra felt every minute of it. She had trained for decades in spatial warfare, quantum tactics, and psychic command interfaces. Now she would have to learn to fight like a species that had barely mastered interstellar travel a century ago. Earth's gravity hit her the moment she stepped off the transport. It was like wearing ceremonial armor made of lead. The air was thick, almost soupy compared to the carefully regulated atmosphere of Centaurian ships and colonies. A group of humans waited on the landing pad, their faces set in what she had learned were expressions of professional neutrality. Admiral Xari, the foremost human, stepped forward. She was tall for her species, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. I'm Commander Sarah Chen. Welcome to the Earth Special Forces training facility. Zyra attempted the human gesture of a nod, her neck muscles protesting against Earth's gravity. Commander. I appreciate your willingness to accommodate this arrangement. Accommodate? A male human at Chen's side barked out a laugh. Ma'am, you're not a guest here. You're a trainee. Starting right now. He wore insignia identifying him as Captain Marcus Rodriguez. Chen shot him a warning look before turning back to Zyra. The captain is correct, though his delivery leaves something to be desired. You may be an admiral in your fleet, but here, you're starting from zero. Are you prepared for that? Zyra's scales rippled with subtle patterns of determination. I've reviewed your training protocols, Commander. They seem manageable. Several of the humans exchanged glances that Zyra couldn't quite interpret. Chen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. We'll see. Captain Rodriguez will show you to your quarters. Training begins at 0500 tomorrow. As Zyra followed Rodriguez across the compound, she noticed the stares from human personnel. Some were curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. She had expected this. Humans were notorious for their tribal instincts and suspicion of outsiders. Her quarters turned out to be a Spartan room with a bed that looked painfully flat compared to the suspension chamber Centaurians preferred. A locker contained several sets of human military training gear, modified for her physiology. Get some rest, Rodriguez said from the doorway. Tomorrow's going to be a wake-up call. He paused, then added, for both of us, I suspect. Alone in her room, Zyra began her species meditation ritual, trying to center herself. The gravity made even this simple act challenging. Through the window, she could see the sun setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of home. But this wasn't home. This was Earth, and she was about to learn exactly why humans had earned their reputation as one of the most formidable species in the galaxy. She activated her personal log, speaking in the musical tones of her native language. Day 0. The humans seemed to take pride in their physical limitations, turning them into strengths through sheer determination. Their training methods appear inefficient, but there must be something I'm missing. The Council believes this exchange is crucial for the Alliance. They speak of understanding humans, but I suspect the truth is that they fear them. Not for what they are now, but for what they might become. Tomorrow, I begin to learn why. The night passed slowly. Earth's rotation felt wrong, its magnetic field sang at frequencies that set her nerve endings on edge. When the wake-up call came at 0445, Zyra was already awake, her scales a mottled pattern of anxiety and determination. She donned the modified human training gear, noting how it restricted her natural bioluminescence, a tactical advantage, she had to admit. As she stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness, she found Rodriguez waiting. "Ready for your first day of being human, Admiral?" Zyra's facial tendrils twitched. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Captain. I'm not here to become human. I'm here to understand them." Rodriguez grinned, a human expression that Zyra had learned could mean many things, few of them pleasant. "That's where you're wrong. Understanding isn't enough. You need to feel what we feel, struggle how we struggle. Only then will you get it." "Get what?" "Why we're still here. Why every species that underestimated us is either gone or calling us allies now." He checked his chronometer. "Time to run, Admiral. Try to keep up." As they began what would be the first of many grueling physical exercises, Zyra realized that her previous analysis of human military training had been dangerously incomplete. They weren't just training their bodies, they were forging something else, something that her species, for all their advanced technology and evolved capabilities, might have forgotten along the way. The sun rose over the training facility, casting long shadows across the ground. Somewhere in the distance, she heard human voices raised in a rhythmic chant, their words indistinguishable but their purpose clear. Unity. Strength. Purpose. Her first day of becoming something new had begun. 2 weeks into her training, Admiral Zyra Xari discovered that humans had invented something far worse than their primitive projectile weapons, the obstacle course. Her scales burned a bright orange of exhaustion as she dragged herself through another mud pit, her natural bioluminescence completely obscured by Earth's dirt. "Move it, Xari." Rodriguez's voice boomed across the training ground. "The enemy won't wait for you to catch your breath." Zyra's translator implant had stopped working 3 days ago, shorted out by sweat, of all things. But she didn't need it anymore to understand the captain's meaning. Her arms trembled as she pulled herself up the rope wall, her clawed hands finding purchase where human fingers would grip. Incoming. The warning came too late. Training drones buzzed overhead, pelting the course with simulated plasma fire. In space, Zyra could have calculated the exact trajectory of each shot, used her ship's quantum computers to plot the perfect evasion pattern. Here, covered in mud and exhausted, she did something very human, she improvised. Rolling into a shallow ditch, she grabbed a handful of mud and hurled it at the nearest drone. The wet earth struck its sensors, sending it spiraling off course. She heard laughter from the watching recruits, then silence as the drone crashed into 2 others, creating a chain reaction that cleared her path to the finish line. Commander Chen stood at the endpoint, her expression unreadable. Creative solution, trainee. But in the field, you won't always have mud to throw. Zyra's facial tendrils twitched in what the humans now recognized as her version of a grim smile. Then I'll find something else to throw. Later that evening, soaking in the special mineral bath designed to help her alien physiology recover, Zyra reviewed her personal log. Her voice was hoarse, another new experience. Day 15. The humans' insistence on physical training initially seemed like a primitive limitation. I'm beginning to understand it's a deliberate choice. They don't trust technology they can't function without. Every tool must be an extension of their capabilities, not a replacement for them. A knock on her quarters door interrupted her recording. Enter. Lieutenant Maya Santos, one of the few humans who'd made an effort to understand Centaurian customs, stepped in. She carried what Zyra recognized as a first aid kit. Saw you favoring your left side during the night run. Thought you might need this. Zyra's scales shifted to a pale blue of surprise. I didn't think anyone noticed. We notice everything. Maya sat on the room's single chair. It's part of the training. Speaking of which, tomorrow's going to be rough. Urban combat scenarios. How is that different from today's roughness? Maya's laugh was gentle but held an edge. Today was about your individual limits. Tomorrow, you'll learn about team dynamics. And trust me, that's where most non-human trainees struggle the most. The next morning proved Maya right. The urban combat facility was a maze of concrete buildings, narrow alleys, and sudden open spaces, a perfect replica of humanity's chaotic architectural style. Zyra was assigned to a 4-person team, herself, Maya, a former Marine named Jackson, and a quiet demolitions expert called Chen Wei. Rules of engagement are simple, Rodriguez briefed them. Your team against 3 others. Capture the objective, hold it for 10 minutes. Non-lethal rounds only, but they'll hurt enough to make you take this seriously. Zyra's natural combat instincts screamed at the scenario. This is inefficient. In real combat, we would simply orbital strike. EMP burst. Neural disruption. Rodriguez cut her off. Welcome to fighting like a human, Admiral. Sometimes the only resources you have are the ones between your ears and in your hands. The exercise began with a cacophony of simulated explosions. Zyra's team took cover in a partially collapsed building, already under fire from at least 2 directions. Her enhanced hearing picked up movement from multiple vectors, but the echoes made precise location impossible. We need to move, Jackson hissed. We're getting boxed in. Zyra's military training screamed for her to take command, but she remembered her role here. Suggestions? Maya pointed to a narrow ventilation shaft. That connects to the underground level. We could. Too obvious, Chen Wei spoke for the first time. They'll expect that. Zyra's scales shifted as an idea formed. What if we make them expect it? Her teammates looked at her curiously. Humans love patterns, yes. Let's give them one to follow. The plan came together quickly. Jackson and Maya made a show of helping Zyra into the ventilation shaft, making enough noise to attract attention. Chen Wei rigged simple noisemakers, bits of debris on strings, to simulate movement through the tunnels. Meanwhile, Zyra used her species' natural climbing abilities to scale the external wall, her mud-covered scales perfectly camouflaged against the concrete. The ambush was perfect. As the other teams converged on the underground access points, Zyra's team struck from above and behind. Within minutes, they had control of the objective. Not bad, Rodriguez admitted during the debrief. Using your alien capabilities within human tactical frameworks instead of trying to fight like either species. There might be hope for you yet. But the real breakthrough came 3 days later, during an endurance march through mountainous terrain. The thin air at high altitude affected everyone, but Zyra's alien physiology made it particularly challenging. 2/3 through the march, her legs gave out. Leave me, she gasped to Maya, her scales a sickly gray. Complete the mission. Jackson, who had been bringing up the rear, snorted. That's not how we do things. Before she could protest, he and Chen Wei had lifted her between them. Maya took her pack. Why? Zyra managed to ask. This compromises the entire team's effectiveness. Because, Maya said, adjusting the extra weight of the pack, sometimes the mission isn't about being effective. Sometimes it's about proving that nothing can break us apart. Through the haze of exhaustion, Zyra felt something shift in her understanding. Humans didn't train together to become more efficient. They trained together to become something greater than the sum of their parts. That night, her log entry was brief, day 18. I think I'm beginning to understand. Humans don't overcome their limitations. They embrace them, share them, and in doing so, transform them into strengths. It's not logical. It's not efficient. But perhaps that's exactly why it works. As she drifted off to sleep, her scales finally settling into a calm deep blue, Zyra realized she no longer felt the constant pull of Earth's gravity as an enemy. Like everything else in human military training, it had become a teacher, harsh and uncompromising, but ultimately transformative. 1 month into her training, Admiral Zyra Xari stood in the combat simulation chamber, facing off against a holographic opponent. Her scales rippled with patterns of concentration as she moved through the space, no longer fighting against Earth's gravity but working with it. Commander Chen watched from the observation deck, her expression thoughtful. "Show me what you've learned," Chen's voice echoed through the chamber. "No restrictions." The holographic opponent, a representation of a Krell warrior, charged forward. In the past, Zyra would have attempted to counter with traditional Centaurian combat forms, all fluid grace and calculated precision. Instead, she dropped low, using the human technique Jackson had taught her, letting the enemy's momentum work against them. But she added her own twist, her bioluminescent scales flashed in a disorienting pattern just as she moved. The Krell simulation staggered, its programming struggling to adapt to the unexpected combination of tactics. Zyra pressed her advantage, flowing between human and Centaurian combat styles with increasing confidence. When the simulation finally ended, Chen's slow nod told her everything she needed to know. "Interesting approach," Chen said, entering the chamber. "You're not fighting like a human or a Centaurian anymore. You're fighting like something new." Zyra's facial tendrils curled thoughtfully. "I've been studying your species' martial arts history. You have a concept, adaptation. Taking what works, discarding what doesn't, creating something unique to the individual." Bruce Lee, Maya's voice came from the doorway. His philosophy was about honest self-expression in combat. Exactly, Zyra's scales shifted to a deep purple of satisfaction. Why should I try to fight exactly like a human when I can fight like myself, incorporating the best of both worlds? The next few days saw Zyra working intensively with her team, developing new combined tactics. Chen Wei's expertise with explosives paired surprisingly well with Zyra's ability to sense electromagnetic fields. They could time detonations with unprecedented precision. Jackson's brute force approaches gained new subtlety when combined with Centaurian misdirection techniques. But it was during a night operation that everything truly came together. Their team was tasked with infiltrating a heavily defended position, a challenge that had defeated 3 previous groups. As they crouched in the darkness, studying the patrol patterns, Zyra felt something click in her mind. "We've been thinking about this wrong," she whispered to her teammates. "Look at how they're moving, it's all based on human visual patterns and expectations." Maya caught on first. "But you don't see like we do." "Exactly." Zyra's scales dimmed to near-perfect darkness. "Humans rely heavily on visual input, but my species evolved other sensory capabilities. We can use that." Their plan was audacious. While Zyra navigated through the defenders' blind spots, areas that appeared dark to human eyes but blazed with infrared and electromagnetic signatures to her senses, the rest of the team created carefully timed distractions. Chen Wei's small charges disrupted electronic surveillance exactly when Jackson launched his frontal assault, drawing all attention forward. Maya, meanwhile, had learned to read the subtle patterns in Zyra's bioluminescence. When Zyra's scales flickered in a particular sequence, Maya knew exactly when to move, even in near-total darkness. They breached the objective without a single simulated casualty. During the debrief, Rodriguez couldn't hide his impressed expression. You've turned your alien nature from a challenge into an advantage. But more importantly, you've taught your human teammates to do the same. That's what you've been trying to teach me all along, isn't it? Zyra asked. It's not about overcoming differences. It's about transforming them into strengths. Later that evening, Zyra found herself in the base's small recreation area, surrounded by off-duty personnel. The initial stares and whispers had given way to something else: respect, curiosity, and even friendship. A group of Marines was trying to teach her poker, though her scales color changes made bluffing particularly challenging. Your tell is worse than a neon sign, Jackson laughed, collecting another pot. But you're learning. Everything's a lesson with you humans, Zyra observed, her scales shifting in amusement. Even your recreational activities are about strategy and deception. Life's the best teacher, Chen Wei spoke up from his corner. And you're a quick study. That night, Zyra's personal log reflected her evolving perspective, day 32. The humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. I'm beginning to see how this mindset has shaped their entire species. They don't just adapt to challenges, they actively seek them out, using each obstacle as a catalyst for growth. It's inefficient, often painful, but undeniably effective. She paused, watching the moonlight play across her iridescent scales. The Centaurian High Command sent me here to learn human military tactics. Instead, I'm learning something far more valuable: how to see limitation not as a weakness, but as an opportunity for transformation. Every species in the galaxy has underestimated humanity because we look at their constraints and see disadvantages. We never stop to consider that these very constraints might be the source of their greatest strengths. A knock at her door interrupted her recording. It was Commander Chen, holding what appeared to be a modified combat harness. We've got a new challenge for you tomorrow, she said without preamble. How do you feel about orbital insertions? Zyra's scales flickered with excitement and apprehension. You mean jumping from perfectly functional spacecraft? More human insanity. Chen's smile was knowing. The best kind of insanity. The kind that makes the impossible possible. As Chen left, Zyra examined the harness, noting how it had been adapted to work with her physiology. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, and new opportunities for growth. She found herself looking forward to it all. The warning klaxons shattered the pre-dawn silence at the Earth Special Forces training facility. Admiral Zyra Xari was already awake, reviewing orbital insertion protocols, when the facility's AI broadcast cut through her concentration. All personnel, this is not a drill. Unknown hostile forces detected in Sector 7. Combat teams deploy immediately. Zyra's scales shifted to alert patterns as she met her team in the armory. Maya was checking her rifle with practiced efficiency, while Chen Wei loaded his demo pack with actual explosives instead of training charges. Jackson arrived last, his usual grin replaced by focused determination. Situation report, Commander Chen's voice crackled over their comms. 3 unidentified ships breached our outer defense grid using some kind of stealth tech. They've deployed ground forces in the mountain training sector. Initial scans suggest Black Star mercenaries. Zyra's facial tendrils curled in recognition. Black Star? They're supposed to be myth, pirates who steal military tech from advanced civilizations. Myths don't trigger proximity sensors, Rodriguez cut in, joining them fully armed. All teams, load up. We're dropping in 5. As they boarded the deployment shuttle, Zyra felt a strange calm settle over her. This wasn't a simulation or training exercise, this was real combat, the kind she trained for her entire career. But something was different now. She wasn't thinking about quantum battle matrices or strategic algorithms. She was thinking about her team. They'll be expecting standard human defensive protocols, she said as the shuttle climbed. We can use that. Maya nodded, understanding immediately. Hybrid tactics. Exactly. Zyra's scales rippled with tactical patterns. They won't be prepared for what we've become. The drop zone was a nightmare of broken terrain and scattered sensor readings. 3 Blackstar dropships had landed in a triangular formation, their crews efficiently setting up defensive positions. Their armor was a patchwork of stolen technology. Zyra recognized Centaurian shield generators alongside human pulse rifles and Krell heavy weapons. Multiple teams deploying, Chen's voice was steady in their ears. "Sorry team, you're our ghost unit. Get inside their perimeter and disrupt their command structure. The rest of us will handle the direct assault." As their shuttle executed a high-altitude deployment, Zyra felt her training kick in. The orbital insertion harness hummed against her scales as she led her team into a steep descent. Earth's gravity, once her enemy, now felt like an ally, helping her slice through the air with precision. They landed hard but silent, using the mountain's natural cover. Chen Wei immediately began setting up his specialized charges, small devices that could disrupt both human and alien tech. Jackson and Maya moved to flanking positions while Zyra extended her sensory tendrils, reading the electromagnetic signatures of the enemy forces. "Their tech integration is sloppy," she whispered. "Multiple power signatures competing with each other. If we time this right." An explosion from the main assault drew the mercenaries' attention. That's when Zyra's team struck. Chen Wei's charges detonated in sequence, creating cascading failures in the enemy's mixed technology defenses. Zyra led the advance, her scales shifting through disorienting patterns that played havoc with both human vision and alien targeting systems. Jackson and Maya moved like extensions of her own body, covering angles and exploiting openings created by her biological warfare. This wasn't just coordinated combat, it was something new, a perfect fusion of human adaptability and Centaurian precision. The mercenaries' response was chaos. Their stolen tech advantages turned into liabilities as systems conflicted with each other. A Blackstar commander tried to activate a Centaurian shield matrix, only to have it fail when Chen Wei's charges disrupted its power signature. Maya's rifle fire found gaps in armor plates meant for different species' anatomies. But the real test came when they reached the central dropship. A massive mercenary in hybrid-powered armor emerged, wielding what looked like a salvaged Krell plasma cannon. "Interesting," the voice boomed through external speakers. "A Centaurian fighting with human tactics. The galaxy's getting stranger." Zyra's response was pure action. She charged forward, using every lesson Earth's gravity had taught her. The mercenary fired, expecting her to move with Centaurian grace. Instead, she dropped and rolled, pure human ground fighting. Her scales flashed in seizure-inducing patterns as Jackson and Maya struck from opposite angles. The mercenaries' armor, designed to counter either human or alien attacks, couldn't adapt to their hybrid assault. Chen Wei's last charge found a weak point where different technology types merged, and the mighty armor collapsed in a shower of sparks. "Command center secured," Zyra reported, her scales still rippling with combat patterns. But something's not right. Their resistance was too coordinated, Maya finished. This wasn't a random raid. They found their answer in the dropship's computer core. The Blackstar mercenaries had been testing Earth's defenses, probing for weaknesses in preparation for a larger attack. But they hadn't expected to encounter a Centaurian officer leading human special forces in seamless combination. Hours later, as cleanup teams secured the area, Commander Chen found Zyra and her team resting against their captured dropship. "Initial reports are already causing waves," she said. "Both Earth Command and the Centaurian High Council are very interested in how a mixed-species team managed to outperform standard units." Zyra's scales shifted to thoughtful colors. "We didn't outperform them. We evolved beyond them. Everything you've been teaching me, it wasn't about making me fight like a human. It was about showing me how to become something more than either of our species alone." Rodriguez joined them, sporting a fresh bandage. "Maybe that's the real lesson here. The galaxy's changing. The old ways of fighting, pure human or pure alien, they're not enough anymore. That night, Zyra made her log entry standing under Earth's stars, day 45. Today we faced real combat, not as humans or Centaurians, but as warriors who have learned to transcend those boundaries. The Black Star mercenaries thought they could gain advantage by stealing technology from multiple species. What they didn't understand is that true strength comes not from taking, but from sharing, learning, and growing together. She paused, watching a shooting star trace its way across the sky. Perhaps this is what the Alliance truly needs, not just cooperation, but transformation. A willingness to become something entirely new. The message from the Centaurian High Council arrived 2 months into Zyra's training: return immediately. Crisis situation. Empire under threat. Her old self would have departed without hesitation. But as she stood in Commander Chen's office, her scales shifting between duties purple and conflicts gray, Zyra found herself torn. The Black Star raid wasn't isolated, she explained, projecting the intelligence reports. They've been probing Centaurian space too. But our analysts missed it because they were using modified human tactics, approaches we dismissed as primitive. Chen studied the data, her expression grim. And now they're launching a major offensive? Yes, but not just against my people. Zyra brought up another projection. They're striking simultaneously at Earth and Centaurian targets. They've learned to exploit the gaps between our defensive strategies. Then we'll have to show them the bridges we've built across those gaps, Maya said from the doorway. Jackson and Chen Wei stood beside her, already geared up. Rodriguez joined them, his usual gruffness tempered by urgency. Earth Command has authorized a joint response task force. Question is, Admiral, are you ready to lead it? Zyra's scales rippled with determination. Not as an admiral. As something new. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. Earth's advanced strike shuttles were retrofitted with Centaurian sensor arrays. Human combat teams were quickly trained to respond to Centaurian tactical signals. Zyra's own flagship, the Stellar Dawn, entered orbit with a mixed crew of humans and Centaurians. This is unprecedented, her old second-in-command, Vex, commented as humans moved through the crystalline corridors of the Centaurian vessel. The Council is uncertain about this level of integration. The Council's uncertainty is why we're vulnerable, Zyra replied, her scales showing the new patterns she'd developed on Earth, neither human nor Centaurian, but something evolved. We can't afford to fight as separate species anymore. The Black Star fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly where Zyra predicted, a weak point between Earth and Centaurian defense grids. But instead of finding two separate forces struggling to coordinate, they faced something entirely new. All teams, execute protocol fusion, Zyra commanded from the Stellar Dawn's bridge. Human strike teams deployed from Centaurian ships, their tactics enhanced by alien technology. Centaurian cruisers moved with unprecedented aggression, adopting human combat maneuvers that their enemies had dismissed as reckless. Maya's voice crackled over the command channel as her shuttle team executed a precision strike on a Black Star command ship. Target shields adapting to our weapons. Pattern shift, Zyra responded, her scales flowing with combat rhythms. Chen Wei, now. The demolitions expert, operating from a modified Centaurian gunship, launched a barrage of hybrid charges. The explosives, combining human ingenuity with Centaurian energy manipulation, created gaps in the enemy's stolen shield technology. Jackson led the boarding action, his human combat team moving in perfect sync with Centaurian warriors. They're trying to adapt, he reported, but their stolen tech can't keep up with our combined tactics. The battle raged across space and multiple planetary surfaces. The Black Star forces, for all their stolen technology, couldn't match the seamless integration of human and Centaurian capabilities. Where they expected predictable patterns, they found constant adaptation. When they tried to exploit known weaknesses, they discovered those weaknesses had become strengths. But the true test came when a massive Black Star dreadnought, bristling with stolen weapons, targeted the Earth Defense Headquarters. The logical choice was to preserve the stellar dawn, to maintain command and control. The Centaurian Admiral Zyra would have made that choice. Instead, she made a human one. "All hands, brace for impact," she ordered, directing her ship into a descent trajectory. "We're going to show them what happens when you threaten our home." "Our home?" Vex questioned, even as he carried out her orders. "You mean Earth's home?" Zyra's scales showed colors no Centaurian had ever displayed before, a fusion of alien determination and human spirit. "Both." "Neither." "Everything we're fighting for." The Stellar Dawn, a masterpiece of Centaurian engineering, performed maneuvers its designers had never imagined possible. It dove through Earth's atmosphere, its crystalline hull screaming in protest, as human gunners operated Centaurian weapons with impossible precision. The Black Star dreadnought, expecting either a human last stand or a Centaurian strategic withdrawal, was unprepared for their kamikaze precision strike. Zyra's ship crashed through its shields, targeting exactly the points where stolen technologies interfered with each other. "All teams, clear the ship," Zyra commanded as the Stellar Dawn systems began to fail. The evacuation pods, modified to human specifications, launched in perfect sequence. As she reached her own pod, she found Maya, Jackson, and Chen Wei waiting. "Can't let you have all the fun," Maya said, helping her strap in as the pod launched. They watched from the ground as the Stellar Dawn, guided by its last automated commands, tore through the dreadnought's defenses. The explosion lit up the sky like a new sun, a testament to the power of two civilizations united in purpose. Hours later, as recovery teams sifted through the aftermath, Zyra stood with her team watching both Earth and Centaurian ships moving through the sky in perfect coordination. Commander Chen approached, holding a datapad. "Both Earth Command and the Centaurian High Council are requesting your presence," she said. "They want to understand how this victory was possible." Zyra looked at her team, human and Centaurian officers working together, checking equipment, sharing jokes, planning for the next challenge. Her scales shifted to a new color, one that represented not authority or duty, but possibility. "Tell them I'll show them something better than an explanation," she replied. "I'll show them the future." Her final log entry was brief, Day 75. "Today we proved that the greatest strength lies not in overcoming our differences, but in transforming them into something greater than ourselves. The galaxy is changing, and we must change with it. Not as humans, not as Centaurians, but as pioneers of what we can become together." As the sun set on Earth, Zyra Xari stood with feet planted firmly on human soil, her scales reflecting both Earthlight and starlight. She was no longer just an admiral, no longer just a trainee. She had become living proof that the next step in evolution wasn't about becoming stronger alone, but about growing stronger together.